In July 2026, the temporary peace between the United States and Iran violently collapsed. Global markets reacted immediately, with crude oil prices surging as air raid sirens echoed across the Persian Gulf and multi-front military operations resumed. This map shows the geographic center of the crisis, the Strait of Hormuz. It is a narrow, 21-mile-wide corridor that functions as the most critical energy choke point on Earth, forcing a massive percentage of the global daily oil supply through a tiny geographical window. The ceasefire signed in April was supposed to guarantee stability. It required Iran to ensure the safe passage of commercial vessels and negotiate maritime operations with neighboring Gulf states. Instead, Tehran used the diplomatic pause to demand absolute control over the shipping lanes. When the United States and its Gulf allies flatly rejected those terms, diplomacy broke down. A strategic vacuum opened up in the water, and Iran immediately deployed its military forces to fill it. The violence that followed is highly calculated. Both nations are treating the strait as a geopolitical chessboard, manipulating the rules of escalation and using targeted force to secure the region, carefully avoiding the trigger for a massive ground invasion. During the 3-month ceasefire, Iranian forces were not standing down. They used the pause in hostilities to dig out buried missile launchers and bring replacement coastal radar networks online. Once those capabilities were rebuilt, Iran went on the offensive. They launched projectiles at Saudi and Qatari commercial shipping vessels, executing a coercion campaign designed to force the Gulf states to accept the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as the dominant naval authority. On July 7th, the United States retaliated. U.S. Central Command executed a massive sweep aimed at degrading Iran's maritime threat network, striking more than 80 targets in a single day, including drone launch sites and radar installations. The U.S. strikes specifically targeted the IRGC's naval fleet, wiping out more than 60 fast attack craft operating in and around the strait. Washington paired this kinetic action with immediate economic pressure. The administration revoked lucrative oil waivers that had previously allowed Iran to sell on the open market, and expanded their target list to include civilian-adjacent infrastructure. That included direct strikes on Makarg Island facilities, damaging the exposed maritime docks and dense clusters of storage tanks responsible for the vast majority of Iran's crude oil exports. By systematically degrading Tehran's ability to threaten shipping and dismantling its export infrastructure, the U.S. is walking right up to the line of total war without crossing it. Iran's response was swift and direct. They launched waves of drones and missiles straight at U.S. Central Command installations located in Bahrain and Kuwait. Despite the heavy barrage and physical damage to the bases, the strikes resulted in 0 American casualties. This non-lethal outcome was intentional. Iranian leadership has closely monitored leaks from the White House, indicating that President Trump is highly reluctant to resume a full-scale ground war unless American troops are killed. Tehran is applying maximum pressure, just millimeters below the U.S. red line. Both nations are proving they will tolerate massive structural destruction to control the Strait of Hormuz, so long as it stops short of an invasion. The fallout from these strikes extends far beyond the Middle East. The sheer volatility of the conflict is actively stress-testing alliances that have anchored global security since the Second World War. President Trump has explicitly tied the military conflict in the Gulf to the future of NATO, using European support for the U.S. strikes as a direct loyalty test for member nations. When Washington requested the use of Italian air bases and naval assistance for the operations in the strait, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni flatly refused. At the same time, the U.S. is forging strange new partnerships. Washington recently lifted sanctions on Turkey and publicly praised President Recep Tayyip Erdogan for aligning with U.S. objectives against Tehran. As the diplomatic map shifts, the military footprint is following suit, with bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia proving highly vulnerable to Iranian missile fire. The Pentagon is evaluating a withdrawal from its traditional Gulf strongholds. To maintain operational command over the region, CENTCOM is actively considering relocating its forward headquarters directly into Israel, a logistical pivot that would have been unthinkable before the ceasefire collapsed. The strategic demands of the strait have triggered a structural realignment of American power. Decades of diplomatic precedent are being set aside, as the U.S. trades European cooperation for new hubs in Israel and closer alignment with Turkey.